Good morning, Mississippi. You are tuned in to the Andrew Gosser Show right here on 103.9 WYAB. Today is Tuesday, the 16th of December, 2025, and we are streaming on Rumble, and we are streaming on X, and are streaming on YouTube, and we are streaming at WYAB.com. So if you can't pick up our radio signal, go ahead and tune into the live stream. We appreciate it. And if you are tuned in on the live stream and you are online, go ahead and follow me on X. It's just Andrew Gosser, AndrewGasser. Appreciate that greatly. If you want to be part of the show today, number is 601 879 0002. And the text line is open 601 879 5060. We've got great stuff coming up. Great stuff coming up. Tomorrow, we're going to have special guest on the show, Patricia Williamson, GOP chairman of Carver County, Minnesota, talking about all the craziness that's going on up there. It's going to be a real eye opener, especially as we move closer to the new legislative session. We're going to do some great things in that legislative session. Looking forward to talking about it. And we're just laying the groundwork out for it right now. You know, last night was a Christmas party. Wasn't able to go. Was feeling a little bit under the weather. But you know what? It is that time of season. And one of the big things that my kids keep talking to me about, and we talked about it yesterday on the program, was going to the mall. And we had one of the listeners actually reached out to me via Facebook, which I appreciated greatly. And he said to go check out the Port Mall or North Park Mall. So I might go do that this weekend, go over there and see what's going on. There are all sorts of crazy stories, absolutely nuts. But the one thing that we can all confirm, that we can all agree upon, is that Trump derangement syndrome is real, folks. It's not even debatable. TDS is real. And it's one of those things where I look at it, and these are grown adults. These are people who are functioning in society. They have jobs, they create jobs, they spur the economy. But if you go on your social media platform of choice, you see grown adults just completely losing their mind. And I sit there and I look at it, and like some of these people who I know personally, I'm like, do, do you realize how you look? Do you realize how you look to your employer? It's one thing to say, I disagree with President Trump on this and that and other thing. But there is something that has happened to the American minds out there. And I mean, some of these people I know, I mean, they're supposed to be our most educated. These are like the PhDs, the doctors. There is a difference between a PhD and a medical doctor. We know that. We don't need to go through that. But my goodness gracious, if I pull up my X timeline and I start looking at this, I don't want to talk about too many of them. But the one guy out there, this Brylan kid, and Clay kind of talked about it. I'm not going to play the audio, but who is mentoring this kid? And he is a kid. He's a freshman in high school or in college. You know, he was zooming all over the United States, trying to pick up the torch for Charlie Kirk. There's nobody picking up that torch. Picking up the torch for Charlie Kirk is trying to pick up the torch for Rush Limbaugh. It's just not going to happen. There'll be other people out there who can do little snippets of it and they can get a portion of it. But if we're being truthful and honest about it, we all understand that just nobody's gonna pick up what Charlie did or Rush. And to sit there and try to fill that gap, that void that is left, it number one, it takes time. Just it was a shock. Rush, not so much, but Charlie certainly was. And it's gonna take time to develop and develop that talent, number one, then nurture it along. And I mean, I don't know Brylan personally. I met him at an event up in Oxford last year at a Trump rally. Great job to the Oxford Republicans up there for doing that, by the way. You all did a great job. But how he acted during that event was completely different than if you go look on X and you go look at some of the stuff that he is posting. He's completely I'm just going to say he's completely tried to monetize the tragic events of September 10th. Absolutely terrible, my opinion. So we look at what Brylan's doing, but we also have to look at what other people are doing. People like Tim Burchett. And, he is coming out with some great stuff. And one of the things that he came out with was he was talking about how we've rescued 60,000 kids, I think was the number. I'm looking for the exact quote right here. I thought I clipped it, but I didn't. But the Trump administration has gone around and started rounding up all these kids who are either missing or have been trafficked. And if that's the wrong number, I apologize, but I think that's the number. And this is just one of the people who's defending what Trump is doing with illegal immigration, picking up finding the kids who have been lost, and going out there and actually trying to improve our country. The illegal immigration situation is brutal. And I've got a local story here, I believe, coming from the Free Press, the Mississippi Free Press. And it's talking about how people who are here illegally, illegal immigrants, that they're not going to get health care. And this is it. The threat of detention scares immigrants away from health care. This is by Haley Parker on December 16th. And it has this picture. They always show the dramatic imagery. They've got a young kid's hand in the window of a car with the mama's hand on top of the kid's hand. And it's saying, these people don't want to go to get medical care. Well, I'm sad. They could go get medical care, but they might get deported after they get that medical care. When we look at what happened to medical care everywhere where we've had a massive influx of illegal immigrants, the quality of health care has gone down while the cost of health care has gone up. Why? The demand for it is more, and you're having more people being seen, and they're not being given the time that they need. As immigrants in southeastern Louisiana and Mississippi braced for this month's U.S. Homeland Security operation, Christine Rosales Fajardo received a panicked phone call from a friend. The friend's Guatemalan attendant, who didn't know she was pregnant, had just delivered a premature baby in a New Orleans house. The parents lacked legal residency, and the mother refused to go to the hospital for fear of being detained. This is what happens when you have open immigration and you just flood the mega metropolises. And you know what? A few go out to places that are not so heavily populated. But the truth is they're going to go where the food is, the supermarkets are, where the hospitals are, where the jobs are. And they're going to go in there. They're going to skyrocket healthcare. The, the education problem, we didn't even talk about that, but the education problem that we're going to have, you talk about the healthcare, and people are really now starting to see it in places where there has been successful operations. Charlotte, North Carolina being an example. Brother Rick saying, I didn't get a vote for them coming in. They don't get a vote going out. Well, I agree with that. And quite frankly, I think what needs to happen is kind of what Shad White did, where we deputized people to work with ICE so that when the ICE agents do come in, we power them up, we get them going, and they are more effective at doing the things that they need to do. With respect to illegal immigration, people are asking in the chat about what do we know about Rob Reiner's son, and as you know, there were some things going around about Rob Ryan's son. Um, all I know is that the mother. Well, we'll talk about it in the next segment. I want to finish this illegal immigration stuff up. So we've got people out there who are going and finding these people, and they're coming in and reporting saying they don't want to go to the doctor. A premature baby. It doesn't say how old this child is in the story, but you know, if when a baby is born prematurely, they need neonatal care, and they're not getting it. I don't know what happened to this lady. Apparently, she's in New Orleans East Community, and you can find this story Mississippi Today. Yep, I always have this unknown texter says put it on X. All right, I'll put it on X for you. But the bottom line is that the cost of these illegal aliens is having untold effects, and this is just one of them here. And the truth is, we need to take care of our citizens first. And if they come into the hospital, get them treated, then put them on a flight and send them home. That's my opinion. If you've got an opinion, I'd love to hear it. The number is 601-879-0002. We're going to take our first commercial break. We will be right back. Yep. It's only in America and only in Mississippi, but actually everywhere with the web. You are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show right here on 103.9 WYAB. We are moving and grooving. I told you in the last segment that Tim Burchett reported that over 60,000 kids lost during the Biden administration recovered. What it was is over 60,000 kids were lost during the Biden administration. So I want to correct that. And he was actually quoting uh, the immigration, the borders are. So I'm just going to play that clip.
Trump, he asked me to oversee three things. Securing the border, because the last 4 years on the Biden administration, it was an open border. Not because of mismanagement, not because of incompetence, by design. So he asked me, work with the professionals and create a secure border. And Rodney's going to talk about that a lot more in detail in a minute. He wanted me to oversee the historic deportation operation. And that's exactly what we're doing. Promises made, promises kept. The third thing, go find missing children.
Yep.
That the Biden administration released on the sponsors. Because of the open border last 4 years, over 500,000 children were smuggled in this country. Last administration couldn't find 300,000 of them, approximately. Under President Trump's leadership, we have located over 62,000 children that the last administration weren't even looking for.
So there you have it. That's Tom Holloman. The borders are. The texting of the quote was a little bit off, and that's my fault, but we got it right. So over 300,000 kids trafficked into the United States that we don't have accountability for. It's safe to assume that they're in some type of slave labor, whether that be working in a sweatshop or being abused sexually. But we found roughly 62,000 of them, according to Tom Holloman, and that's a good thing. But see, we won't talk about that. We'll talk about a mean tweet that gets everybody all fired up. And you know, I'm just keeping it with 100 with y'all. I'm not backing down from supporting Donald Trump. Nope. And I think what I said yesterday still stands today, and I'll pull that up because there is some stuff out there that what I said was, well, we all can agree that what happened to Rob Reiner and his wife is horrible, and we don't like condone or like or dance on the grave of those two people. You know, the truth is their son, who, and this is being reported from Citizen Free Press and other news sources, their son, they got in an argument the night before at some party, and their son went in there and killed them both. Now, apparently, the mother was found alive and she passed away on the way to the hospital. But on the way to the hospital, she revealed to the paramedics that it was her son that did it. And and what I said yesterday, I think rings true. And this is coming from a former politician, recovering, full recovery, thank goodness. It's the hardest thing to do when you're a politician, when to speak and when to sit still and know. And I said this is still better than Kamala, in my opinion. And we can all agree on that. Some people are not going to like what Trump said. I don't really have a problem with what he said yesterday. It was all legitimate. It was all true. I haven't pulled up any of Rob Reiner's posts. Don't need to. Everybody knows he did so much. He did so much to destroy the confidence in President Trump, whether he was calling him a Nazi, calling him a womanizer, all this other stuff that he was sitting there ripping Trump down, tearing him down on a daily basis. And those who were MAGA and truly supported Trump, no problem. Not a problem at all. But for those who are on the fence or who are a little wishy-washy, kind of like this guy, Brylan, comes out and says, we shouldn't, President Trump shouldn't do something. Well, I agree that when the president shouldn't do something, we should call him out on it. But this isn't the place to do it, in my opinion. And yesterday, talking to you, some of y'all in the afternoon, many of you said you didn't have a problem with it. A few of you said you did. And what's really crazy to me is I think this show has been pretty fair to President Trump. We've called him out when we need to call him out, and when he needs support, we're there for him. But even if we do call him out, we're not going to sit there and say some of the craziness that some of these other people are saying. And President Trump has got the most difficult political job in the world. He's overseeing an economy that was nearly destroyed by the prior administration. He's working with a House, the United States House of Representatives, where, yes, the Republicans do have a majority, but there is a significant statistical number of congressmen who are Republicans who can't stand Donald Trump. And the first chance they get to take him out politically, not saying physically harming the president in any way, shape, matter, form, nature, or relationship, but if they have a chance to do some political damage to the president, they will. Just how is it that we are almost a year into this man's presidency and we still don't have all of his cabinet appointees put into office yet? Who's running the office? Then you see the Senate where President Trump nominates people to go be not Supreme Court justices, but district attorneys, to go federal prosecutors, and they can't get nominated. They can't get through because the Republicans don't have a spine. It just is what it is. And until we get those problems solved, President Trump is going to have to continue to go on the offense like he does. I'll tell you what, MAGA across Mississippi is behind the president. I think I know 2 or 3 people who I would consider diehard MAGA who, for whatever reason, they're not against the president, but they're not going to work for him like they did in 2024 or 2020. And that's fair. All of us change our opinions and points of view at some time in our life, do we not? We all see it. We all do it. That's growing. Now, you might not be growing in the right direction, but you're growing. Sometimes we start off believing one thing, we say, nope, we don't believe that thing anymore, and then we realize, yep, that was the right way to go. That example is faith. I have to say that there have been a lot of really good people I know who have been really silent about the whole Donald J. Trump derangement syndrome problem or epidemic that's going on out there, who, after they saw what happened to Charlie and after they saw what happened to Rob Reiner, they've actually moved to the Trump camp. No one can deny that TDS has not, or no one can deny that the TDS that has spread across our country has caused violence to actually increase, political violence. We talked about it on this show, the Rutgers University study. I'll continue to bring that up. I actually had to give that study to an elected official because they thought I was making it up. You can't make this stuff up, ladies and gentlemen. Between what the mainstream media has done promoting TDS and then what prominent American actors and notable citizens in this country have done, they have created a whole segment of this population who thinks it's okay to go ahead and kill people. Not just politicians. Look at the healthcare CEO who got popped in New York. Andy, you shouldn't say popped. You should say murdered. He was murdered. He got popped. I don't agree with it. I think it's wrong. Violence is never the answer unless you are in a war zone. There's no reason for it. We're Americans. We're supposed to be setting the example for the free world. And the free world looks at us and they look at our kids and what we do to them in our schools. And the worst part about it is TDS it knows no borders. You go over to Europe and you say Trump, and their eyes just bug out. I know. I've been to Europe twice last year, or this year, actually. It's almost next year. Got to go to Spain and to London. Not bragging, it just worked out that way. Big shout out to the Sweepy. Went a little long this segment. We're going to take our next commercial break, and when we get back, I promise we're going to talk about what's going on in Minnesota with the Somalis or the Somalians illegally immigrating there. But we're also going to talk about a potential U.S. Senate candidate, and you might know her name. You are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. Yeah. This is the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We are moving and grooving this Tuesday. Look, do you have a small business that you want to improve your advertising with? Want to increase your business? Why not advertise on 103.9 WYAB? The new year is coming. It's time to go ahead and get your 2026 advertising plans in place. Go ahead and give the station a call. We'd be happy to sit down with you and work out a plan that suits your business. We'll tailor it to your needs and we'll go from there. You can call the station at 601-879-0092, or you can give my text line a message at 601-879-5060 and be happy to help you out. Talking about, I promised in the last segment that we would talk about a potential person running for U.S. Senate in the state of Minnesota. The reason I'm bringing this up, number one, is that the chairman of the Carver County GOP is going to talk about the Somali situation. But we want to make sure that that doesn't happen here. So I am pounding this drum, and you should all be incredibly concerned because what's happening in Minnesota can happen in Michigan, can happen in New York, can happen in Ohio. It hasn't happened here, quite frankly, because we have such a faith-based community. But they're making inroads here, and the whole country literally is looking for Minnesota or for Mississippi for leadership. There are people in Minnesota who say they want to be the Mississippi of the North, which would be pretty cool. But in saying that, someone is potentially running for U.S. Senator. Does the name Michelle Tafoya mean anything to any of y'all? If any of you watched the NFL back in the day, before it went woke, Michelle Tafoya was a sideline reporter for ESPN, and she now has turned political analyst. This is coming from Outkick.com. Michelle Tafoya is considering a run for the United States Senate in her current home state of Minnesota. Sources familiar with the situation say she's expected to make her final decision in early 2026, which is pretty good. We need people who have been in the public spotlight, who have built up a reputation outside of politics. Whether that be someone like Michelle Tafoya, whether it be someone who is a well-known doctor in a congressional district or a state, whether it be a retired or former military dude. It doesn't mean that they're all going to turn out great. See Ben Crenshaw or Dan Crenshaw. But when you have somebody who's been in the public spotlight for so long, where the public can get to really know that person and understand that person with their views, much like President Trump did with The Apprentice, you can overcome some of the woke mind virus stuff that's going on. Tafoya gave up her NBC career so she could speak more openly about her conservative political beliefs. The breaking point for Tafoya at the media giant came in December 2021 when she appeared on The View and served as the conservative panelist. The rest of the cast on the show supported Colin Kaepernick's national anthem protest and his assertion that the NFL resembled the slave trade, while Tafoya raised some important counterpoints. I've been covering the NFL for 25 years, Tafoya said at the time. Nobody forces these guys to play. I thought comparing it to the slave trade was a little rough. These guys enter willingly. They are the most well-cared for people. Yes, they play a hard sport. And every one of them, black, white, Latino, whoever's playing the sport, will tell you how much they love it and what they're willing to do for it. And they make a damn good living. That's what Michelle Tafoya said on The View. Nothing too controversial there. She's then been going after Governor Tim Walz up there, please deal with the horrendous fraud you allowed in Minnesota before anything else. Please, our money was stolen. And we've talked about it on the show, but we need to continue to talk about it. The billions of dollars that have been just taken out of this community. How much has Mississippi lost? How much have we lost due to immigration fraud? People say, well, it won't be as much as 8 billion. Well, we don't have the same population size of Minnesota or of Michigan or of New York, but I bet you the percentage is pretty much the same, considering that Mississippi, we aren't a donor state, we are a gaining state. We gain more federal tax dollars than we give. So those dollars are important. And that's why we have to be serious about this. And if you're not talking to your state rep about this, if you're not talking to your state senator about this, if you have relationships with the governor, the lieutenant governor, whether it be a statewide elected, you should be talking to them about this and speaking about the significance of this issue. For me, it's a no-brainer. And for any of us who have been either off the east coast of Africa or have served over in Africa, you kind of know what Somalia is, and you know what Mogadishu is. You know, we were talking about it during the break with Brother Matt and Brother Clay, and one of them said, I don't know which one, but one of them said they saw the movie about Mogadishu, and that did a pretty good representation. I assure you it was worse, but that's what Hollywood did, and that was one of the better movies, war movies that kind of depicted what it was really like over there. It was heartbreaking, actually, that whole situation for those people who know, and the details I think are out there. We had a carrier battle group, the USS America carrier strike group was right off the coast of Mogadishu when that was happening, and yeah, it was rough. But getting back to just Minnesota, Somalia, Tafoya now running for, or potentially running for U.S. Senator, that would be great. That would be a great pickup for the Republicans. It would be an unexpected pickup for the Republicans in Washington, D.C., if that were to happen. As we know, here in Mississippi, Cindy Hyde Smith, I believe, has one challenger right now. I'll look it up during the break. But our Senate race, I think, is going to be pretty tough nut to crack. One tough nut to crack that seems possible is Benny Thompson. He's going to have a challenger, and that is exciting. We need somebody to challenge him. Not that he hasn't been challenged in the past, but when you have someone with that kind of financial resources to actually go in and make it happen, like Mr. Kevin Wilson does, it's going to be a real race. And it's going to be contested. And people can say, "Oh, there's no chance that." Well, that might happen. But the fact that we as Republicans are actually getting a contested Republican primary with real financial resources and political resources, I think we're looking pretty good, folks. Certainly didn't expect that. Where does the time go? It just seems like every show, the first hour, just zooms by. You are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show right here on 103.9. We will be right back. Yeah, love that song. You know, breaking news just coming here as I was looking at stuff, and we're going to talk about it at the top of the hour. But the United States is pulling out of a trade deal with Great Britain, and it's causing all sorts of ripple effects across the stock markets. And brother dog, if you're out there listening, I see you in the chat. Need an update on gold and an update on silver, because if this actually it is going to be a reset. Um, I'm not telling you what to do, but that precious metals always seems to do a little bit better job. But of course, do your own due diligence and research. One of the things that caught my attention was, when I look at this radio show, I try to bring you things that I think you would enjoy because I enjoy them. And I grew up watching Star Wars, and I love Star Wars. As far as I'm concerned, episode 7, 8, and 9 in Disney can pretty much all go away. But Ryan Johnson, he was the creator of The Lost Jedi, not The Last Jedi, The Lost Jedi. But he came out with an article at that Park Place, which I love. I not only go to their website, but I also watch their YouTube channel. Ryan Johnson has come out and said that The Last Jedi would have been worse if he hadn't ignored the Star Wars fan pushback. And in this article, he claims that he actually did things to make the movie more palatable to us, the fans. And what's really interesting, like, the more, and that was the last movie I saw in theaters as far as Star Wars is concerned. It was the last movie I went to see with Star Wars, and it was so bad. But I look at some of the cinematography now, and they have this one picture of Daisy Ridley holding a lightsaber. And when you look at where she has her hands placed, it's literally right on the lightsaber. And of course, you wouldn't recognize this at the time of the movie, swinging around so fast. But this still, I'm just like, who was choreographing this? And that movie absolutely destroyed the Star Wars franchise. Some argue that it was the beginning of the downfall of Disney. I think there were some signs before that, but ultimately, you've got people who were in direct control of Disney Star Wars who were killing it, and then coming out and say, it wasn't our fault. If we didn't do what we did, it would have been worse. And my question is after episode 7, which is when they killed off Han Solo, and Luke shows up for about a minute and a half, just sitting there being quiet and holding a lightsaber. I mean, terrible decisions. But now they're trying to claim that they're the saviors of the franchise. My goodness, I'll tell you what, people out there, absolutely insane, crazy. And when we comes to our entertainment, right now there is no real mainstream entertainment. You can go to Rumble and find some good entertainment there. There's some individual content creators, but even them, they're about to be wiped out by YouTube and Alphabet. But that's a whole nother discussion, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show right here on 103.9. In the next hour, we're going to be talking about Great Britain and America. Yes, you are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show, and we are back on 103.9 WYAB, and we are streaming on YouTube, and we are streaming on X, and we are streaming on Rumble, and we are streaming at WYAB.com. Can't pick up the radio signal? Feel free to pick us up on the stream. We would appreciate that. I also appreciate a follow on X. If you're on X, it's just Andrew Gosser. I try to put all of my stories up there during the show and any important relevant show notes that I think are important. If you want to be part of the program today, the number is 601-879-0002. The text line is open at 601-879-5060. And our mission here at the Andrew Gosser Show is standard. We're here to equip the saints. Who are the saints? Y'all are the saints. And this might have came out yesterday. I did not see it in my news scan, but it definitely blew up about the last 15 or 20 minutes. And this is coming from Reuters. The United States is stalling an implementation of a $40 billion technology agreement with Britain, officials said, following concerns in Washington over London's approach to digital regulation and food standards. Now, if you remember, the EU came out and fined Elon Musk something like $120 million for their lack of correct controls on news that is flowing over X. And the truth of the matter is, it's got nothing to do with the news controls on X. It's got everything to do with the news control that the EU is trying to put on all of its citizens. And apparently, the UK is doing something very similar, even though they are not part of the EU. They're more independent, but they're still issuing a lot of those controls. And I think we should go after those digital controls. Now, I do have to agree with Great Britain on this. And I know because I've been there. The food in Great Britain is a bazillion times better than it is here. You can taste it in the vegetables. You can taste it if you go buy a store-bought steak or store-bought chicken, any meat, stuff like that. Tastes totally different than the stuff that I raise on our farm. Our chicken, like, incredible. And the steak I get from Barefoot Springs Farm in Palahatchie, it's incredible. No steroids, no hormones, no antibiotics. That's a big deal over here, or over in Great Britain and Europe. In the United States, not so much. The tech prosperity deal covering artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and civil nuclear energy was agreed to during President Donald Trump's state visit to Britain in September, in celebrations of the country's close ties and ability to work together on trade and technology. However, something just happened where they won't say what exactly happened, but British officials confirmed on Tuesday that the U.S. has paused implementation of the tech deal. The New York Times, which was the first news agency to report the move, said the U.S. officials were frustrated over food safety restrictions and also online safety rules, digital services tax. So the United States is saying, look, what we agreed to in September, we're not going down that road anymore. And Great Britain, of course, is saying, wait. We want to continue this. Britain ministers say that the May tariff deal allowed higher U.S. beef exports without compromising UK standards and insist digital regulations and taxes will not be negotiated away. So they're at a standstill. And of course, the United States gets to thump its chest with digital companies like Microsoft, Google, Alphabet, NVIDIA, OpenAI. We've got all of these tech giants that, the world uses for us, which makes me kind of think, what is Russia doing behind the scenes? What is China doing behind the scenes? Do you think they have their own operating system just waiting to go? Do you think that they have their own AI well, we know that the Chinese are really going hard on AI along with the United States. What we don't hear a lot about is Russia. But it's hard for me to believe that Russia is not paying attention to the AI revolution. Just got a text from brother Rick. Silver is at $63.82. So we were talking about it last week and it was at like 59. And gold is at $4,324.60. And Rick is giving some other information there. He just says, watch the price of the yen and see what happens. And then Dogfish jumping in and saying if the stock market were to crash prior to the midterm elections, it would create the perfect storm to dethrone MAGA. Well, you're correct about that. And that might be part of the plan. I mean, everybody's 401k, their life savings, potentially crash. Brutal. Not good. Anyways, getting back to the UK here. The UK, of course, is saying that, they're acting in the best interests of Great Britain, and they promised to try to continue to negotiate with the United States, but saying they're not going to negotiate away their online digital surveillance and rules that they have set forth in Great Britain. And I have personal experience with this. I have friends, as many of you know, I'm a huge soccer fan. I played it since the age of 2. I obviously won't play it again, but I love watching it. And my team is the Arsenal. And I have friends who will talk to me about Arsenal all day long. We go back and forth, 6-hour time difference, not a big deal. But all of them have literally asked me, please do not bring up politics. And so we don't. But it's one of those things where, Great Britain is our big brother. That's where we, originally we kind of follow is that. But when you think about it, they do not have a Bill of Rights. They don't have a constitution. They don't have the First Amendment, the freedom of speech like we do. They do not have the Second Amendment. One of my friends who is stationed over there, who is married to a Brit, was talking about how, roughly 35 years ago, they took away all the guns in Great Britain. And if you look at what's going on in Great Britain, how they are having just absolute nightmare of a time with their illegal immigration and their crime. And we don't hear about it because it's not gun crime. But if you go look at their knife crime over there, it is horrible. People can't defend themselves. Yes, a gun is more deadly, but it's a lot easier to defend yourself with a gun than a knife. And what I would say to you is, any of you, just feel free to go ahead and go talk to any law enforcement officer about how dangerous a person wielding a knife is. They can come after you a lot quicker with a knife than most people can draw a holstered weapon, firearm, depending on whether you're a law enforcement officer or a civilian. So Great Britain, in addition to canceling this massive trade deal with the United States, it is going through this really tough time with their immigration and with their crime. And there are other examples of this going all around Europe. The EU and the United States, when it comes to trade, doesn't get along very well. The EU is been completely flooded with illegal aliens, with the exceptions of Hungary and Poland. They flat out said they're not doing any of that. And Italy is rapidly catching up. And Italy is seeing what's happening. The worst example of this, ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you to trust me, but verify me. Go look at what's going on in France, specifically Paris. It is not the same. There are people who have gone over there, and they've been going there since the 90s. We turned 18 in 1990, and a lot of us went overseas in the military and were stationed over in Germany. So it was nothing but a thing and a chicken wing to just zip on over to Paris. And they're like, Andy, it's not the same anymore. Places that we used to go and frequent, they're not there. They were there 4 years ago. They're not there now. And it's a totally different neighborhood. I can tell you that when we went to Spain, and I won't go through the whole story, but we just walked one street off the main drag in Barcelona, and you saw the most anti-Semitic stuff. You saw it written not only in Spanish, but it was written in Arabic and in English. And they're getting invaded, and no one is talking about it. But we will continue to talk about it as long as we're here. And it doesn't matter where here is, as long as we are there. Yep. Last little bit on this British trade deal before we hit the break. A spokesperson for the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, declined to comment in detail on what was said. What he said were live negotiations, adding that the relationship with Washington was still strong. If you go look up what Keir Starmer is doing to the UK, it is like Biden, exactly like Biden. And what's really unfortunate is that the parliament over there, the people who are supposed to keep him in check, not doing so. Even the conservatives over there, they're called the Tories, and then the liberals or the Democrats would be called the Labor Party. And, they do have a third party, much like MAGA, but exactly like MAGA, MAGA sides with the conservatives or the Republicans, but we really only make up about 20-25%. And then when some of us get our feelings hurt, we leave and resign and make life just that much more difficult to get anything done. But that's politics. It's all about me. Me. I saw it happen plenty of times. And for the few that don't make it about themselves and make it about their constituents, well, they do one term, maybe 2 terms max, and then they're kicked out because they're not playing well in the pool or in the sandbox, depending on what you're doing, swimming or building sandcastles. You are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show right here on 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. Oh, yeah. We are back here at the Andrew Gosser Show. And this is just coming. I don't coming across my news feed too. And this one really scares the heck out of me. China unveils the Jutan. What's that? It's the world's largest drone mothership. And if you look at it, it looks like a MQ. I think it's an MQ-1 Global Hawk. It's the global. It looks just like a Global Hawk, and it carries drones. So this thing can fly 2,000 miles away and then drop all these drones out and then just go create mass chaos and havoc. And let's not forget, a lot of those quadcopters that you see, they can carry a 2-pound explosive. And you might be like, Andy, it's a 2-pound explosive. 2-pound explosive is going to hurt anything within a 50-foot square radius. You're not going to make it through that. You're not. And just as this stuff breaks, and I'm just sitting here doing research for something else, this just pops up. It's absolutely it's enough for a military guy like me who studied this stuff for a living for the greater part of my life, and still keeps up to date on a completely unclassified level, of course. But you look at this, and I mean, that's a game changer. Imagine they launch 50 of those, and we can only shoot down 45. That's 5 through, and then each one of those, we'll just say, can carry 20, which I think is a very conservative number. Man, that's brutal. That is completely changing the game. Something we haven't talked about in depth was the Brown University shooting. And one of my texters just said, Andy, is there any positive news out there? Brother, I looked for some today. I just didn't find any. Nothing that I could really kind of brag about. I guess Michelle Tafoya running for Senate would be one. But that's kind of where we're at. But the Brown University shooting leaves students and community frustrated with official response. What I want to say about Brown University is that this is supposed to be one of our best universities in the United States. Harvard, Yale, Brown, Colgate. I mean, they're up there in the creme de la creme. And they are not coming out with much. But what we do know is that the shooter was anti-MAGA, and that the 2 victims were conservative. In fact, the female student who was shot and killed was out there passing out papers on campus, conservative literature. And and of course, Brown isn't coming out with much. The police and the FBI don't have much. They temporarily detained somebody they thought was a person of interest, but then let him go. It is absolutely it's really sad. Experts warn colleges often lack resources and interagency ties to handle active shooter events, as law enforcement experts say campus police receive less training and funding. While eyewitness Haley Souza saw victims on nearby, while eyewitnesses Haley Souza saw victims on nearby streets. I thought there were, well, actually, I think there were 3 that were shot, or 3 victims. I know at least one died, and the other one is not doing well. And the local news agencies, along with the AP, have come out and said that, normally in situations like this, we figure this stuff out quick. And at Brown, they're just not doing it. I don't know if they got some kind of grant and don't have the tools in place to do that. But it's a sad state over at Brown. More economic news. The U.S. economy adds 64,000 jobs in November, and the unemployment rises to 4.6%. Now, if you remember, I think we were down to 4.2 at its lowest, and now it's starting to go back up again. It sure does make me miss the days when we had lower inflation and lower unemployment, somewhere closer to 3%, I think, back in the day. The U.S. economy, or I read that, ADP, a company that provides HR and payroll solutions, reported preliminary estimates showing a reversal from negative employment trends in early November to gaining 64,000 jobs. So they're saying that we are reversing the job loss, and we're actually to job growth, but it's nowhere where we need to be. And Trump's economic measures, this is, of course, left-leaning news source, but I think it's accurate and fair to get all sides of it. I just don't want to give one side of it. Trump's economic measures trigger unemployment in the U.S. up to 4.6%, the highest rate since 2021. We were in the middle of COVID, so I don't know if this is just the transition. And we talked about this too. People knew that, hey, we were going to have to correct the economic environment. You know, we are finding all this fraud, waste, and abuse inside our government, whether that be through illegal immigration or USAID. We know for a fact, because Uncle Elon has even talked about it, that so much of what they were uncovering in Doge has not been implemented. And I believe that when President Trump was talking about that, they were planning on having more of these cuts implemented. But it's definitely causing a really, really big concern over in the stock market and also at the White House. We'll continue to monitor that. And my goodness gracious, 64,000 job increase, and we're still having an increase in unemployment, especially during the Christmas season. Let's be real, right? Most people get that temporary employment over the holidays. Kind of going to what we were talking about yesterday, how Gen Z wishes they could go to the mall. Well, back when we were kids, right, we could get those Christmas time, holiday season jobs, and that just isn't there. So we'll see what's happening on there. I want to save that one for the next segment. So with respect to the job growth, this is just coming in. They are saying that government sector jobs are being lost, and private sector jobs are actually growing. So if that is the case, then that is an absolutely fine thing to happen. The more that we rely on the private sector for growth, especially in the American economy, is going to do so much better than what would happen if we're just growing the government and having growth there. You are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show. We're going to take a quick break. We will be right back. Oh, yeah. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. I've got a question for y'all. For those of you who are Facebook, Instagram users, for those of you who use YouTube and Alphabet, have you noticed the amount of AI slop and garbage that is being promoted to you? Have you noticed how things that you've curated through your own algorithm, because we all have our own algorithm, notice that some of the places that you really used to enjoy just don't come up and get pushed to you per se. Instead, you'll get something that is very similar to it, but not the same. And ultimately, after you watched a while, you realize that it's AI. It's like I can listen to a voice and tell if it's AI. And the sweet bee asks, "How can you do that?" I don't know. I just hear it. But we go back and look at it, and it's an AI channel. Meta, this is coming from Ground News. Meta tolerates rampant ad fraud from China to safeguard billions in revenue. This is coming from Ground News, but via Reuters. Last year, Reuters reported that 19% of Meta Platform's $18 billion in China ad sales came from scams, illegal gambling, pornography, and other banned content. 19%. Meta created an anti-fraud team that briefly cut the problematic ads. I actually remember that. I'm like, hey, Facebook is like 2016 all over again. But CEO Mark Zuckerberg disbanded it due to revenue impact concerns. Internal documents show that an internal Meta executive wrote, "The levels that you are talking about are not defensible. I don't know how anyone could think that this is okay," while Meta ignored the scam ads from China despite knowing users were being defrauded. I'll tell you what, China is attacking us politically. They are building up their military. They're attacking us digitally. They're scamming us, and if we lost all trade with China tomorrow, the United States, we would survive, but it would be an absolute pandemonium, as we would have to rebuild all of our infrastructure, which is something that the president is all about, reshoring jobs from overseas back to America. And let's not forget, we talked about this, I think it was in July or August. Mississippi is currently the third biggest state for reshoring jobs behind Texas and South Carolina. It was Texas 1, South Carolina 2, Mississippi 3, Florida 4. I can't remember who was 5. But long story short is that the Chinese are almost now openly declaring war on the United States. Not military war, but trade war. They're attacking us culturally. Any way that they can to make us weaker, they're doing it. The treasure trove reveals Meta studied abuse scale while resisting fixes to protect revenue, linking ad sales to problematic content and raising concerns about platform safety and ad reliability for users and advertisers by mid 2025. There was a point, uh, you know, I'm just letting you men, you might not agree with this, but the sweet bee and my daughter Toots have access to all my emails, all of my social media. Not that they ever go in it, but they could. There's nothing there. But there was a point where I'm like, I don't even want to go scroll through Facebook reels, because there was stuff on there. I was just like, holy smokes. And I think they got rid of some of it, but I don't go to Facebook reels anymore just for that reason. And this is what they do though. Like, so I have Great Pyrenees. Everybody knows I've got 4 Great Pyrenees. They're great. So I belong to a couple groups. Well, I would sit there and look at those reels. And the next thing you know, it's something that completely never even looked at before, it just popped up. And Sweetie's like, yeah, I'm getting it too on my Facebook. And we asked Toots. She does not have Facebook, but she does have a kid's Instagram. And she's like, every once in a while, Dad, I see something. I'm just like, scroll by it or shut it down. She goes, I just shut it down. But not every kid's going to do that. But this is what China's doing. And then you come back and look at that drone ship that's just out there. My goodness gracious, lovable me. Here's another good story that deals with our military and the things that we're trying to do. We all know that the precursors for fentanyl are built, or not built, but created in China, and then it goes to Central or South America, primarily Venezuela, and then it's shipped to the United States. That's the way it goes. President Trump didn't like that. He said he was going after it. And we talked about in detail about the levels of oversight and judicial review before we go in and really start doing something. And Senator Mark Kelly came out, retired captain of the United States Navy, and was talking about illegal orders, and now he's being investigated. You've got these two congressmen just making up these outrageous claims of impeachment, whether that be for RFK Jr. or whether it be for Pete Hegseth. Well, the Trump or Hegseth and Rubio are expected back on Capitol Hill as questions mount over boat strikes. We've already got all the answers, but look at how the media spins this. They spin it and just keep on bringing it up into the zeitgeist of America. We get by it, we get all the answers, and all of a sudden, brand new stories open up. The Trump administration's military actions against drug boats in the Caribbean have raised questions from Congress due to lack of an explanation and transparency. Well, explanation has, I guarantee you, I was never a congressional or senator attaché, military attaché. That's usually at the 07 to 08 levels, one and 2 stars up there. But I did know a few retired ones, and what they would say is that Congress, especially those on the Select Armed Services Committee and Select Intelligence Committee, so that, and when you hear select, that means you've got select congressmen and select senators who, from both sides of the aisle, who are cleared to get all the stuff that they need to get. And I'm telling you that Congress knows what the United States military is doing in the Caribbean and in the Gulf of America. I noticed that too. They didn't say the Gulf of America. They said the Caribbean. The Caribbean is not off the northern shore of Venezuela. That is the Gulf of America. I see what you did there, Reuters. Without naming the lawmakers, some lawmakers have expressed concerns over the legality and ethics of strikes, which have killed civilians, raising worries about due process and the laws of armed conflict. Which civilians? You can't just make that claim, mainstream media. Those people driving the boats with all those drugs on that we've all seen, those are not civilians. They're actually under the laws of armed conflict that you so dutifully explain. They're actually considered pirates, and they do not get they are not afforded the same protections as, say, a United States sailor, a Chinese sailor, a Russian sailor, a British sailor. They're not wearing the military uniform. The Pentagon has been reluctant to release videos of a controversial strike that killed survivors with inconsistent justifications. There hasn't been any inconsistent justifications. It's been the same. And I've given an explanation is they're not going to show certain things. Like you'll see, and we've seen this since Gulf War One, when we would have these laser guided strikes, and you would see the military release it, but they would put patches over certain things because they don't want to expose what may be under there. And even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. But that is, there's nothing being hidden here. There is no reason to make these claims. We can see the boats. Some of them have 2 outboard motors. Some of them have 4 outboard motors. None of them have fishing nets or anything that would resemble commercial fishing, like the Democrats said in the beginning. And that's when the first videos from the Pentagon actually came out. They're like, look, this is BS. So they are calling in Marco Rubio, Secretary Marco Rubio and Secretary Pete Hegseth, and they're going to go in there and give an unclassified briefing. And of course, it will be dutifully covered by the mainstream media. And any way that they can get these guys to trip up and say something, they're going to do it. Hopefully, I absolutely have every confidence that the Secretary of State and the Secretary of War are going to do a fine job. But we just need to realize that not only are we in a Cold War with the Chinese and the Russian, but we are in a Cold War with our own media. We are. And it's truly unfortunate that we do not see 10 years down the road or 15 years down the road or 20 years down the road. Because if we did, we would not be complaining about the things that are being put in front of our screens and in front of our faces every day. And I just try to point these things out as they come up. Don't always get it all right, but I'm quite certain I'm right on these two stories right here with Meta and with the Secretary of War and Secretary of State having to go in front of Congress to go talk about something that shouldn't even have to be discussed. But it is what it is, and we carry on. You are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9. We will be right back. Yeah. Welcome back to the Andrew Gosser Show. We are moving and grooving. This just came in from an unknown texter, and this is just 20 minutes ago. Kelly on Pentagon review escalation. It doesn't seem very serious. So, Mark Kelly, the retired captain, they've escalated the investigation of him. And it was already at the Secretary of War and Secretary of Navy level. That was bad enough. But I'm telling you right now, this guy, his lawyers must be just pulling out their hair or just saying, keep writing checks that your mouth is going to cash. Because you, it's just, I have not personally been through them, but I've watched people go through them, and it is not fun seeing somebody get court-martialed. If they're taking you to court-martial, they basically got you by the short hairs. Kelly, a retired Navy captain, said Tuesday in an interview on MS Now / BS Always Morning Joe that he has still not been notified of the probe by the Defense Department or the U.S. Navy. There is no Defense Department. It's the Department of War. But we would expect this from MS Now and The Hill, saying, I've actually heard nothing, but we do see some stuff on social media from time to time. Well, you are a captain, sir, and you should know that when you are being investigated by the military, whether it be NCIS, Office of Air Force Special Investigations, whatever it is, they're not going to tell you what they're doing. They're not going to telegraph their moves so that you can go ahead and start preparing for this. Captain Kelly, I've given you the best advice that you can get, which is to lawyer up and quit making posts, because all of this is being used against you. It's not even debatable. Man, I got to figure out who this one person is. I say, post the link, post the link. There you go. Just for you, brother. It's up there. Other things going on. I want to make sure I get this one last story. There is a story going around on Vanity Fair, that bastion of conservative news media, and apparently Susie Wiles, the chief of staff to the president, said that President Trump has an alcoholic's personality in a much more candid interview. So that's going to be absolutely fascinating to be able to read that. We'll definitely talk about that tomorrow. What would cause a chief of staff to do that? I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a quick 2 hours. Appreciate everybody who listened to the show today or streamed to the show today. We will be back in 22 hours. Take care, everybody. Be blessed. That was a tough show.